One of the recurring passive income streams investor can get is the dividend incomes from public listed companies. For example, the shareholders of public bank stocks have received dividend incomes for decades. As stated in the 2020 annual report, if a shareholder of public bank had bought 1,000 shares when it was listed in 1967 and had subscribed for all the rights issues, he would have received a total gross dividend of 1.5 million ringgit. It is like owning a durian tree. The tree keeps growing, and as the tree becomes bigger and bigger, you get more durian fruits year after year. Where do the dividends come from? First and foremost, we must understand where the dividend money originated from. For a business to pay dividends, it must make enough profits to come up with the cash, right? As a shareholder, if you want higher dividends every year, the company must also produce higher net income each year. Only then the party can continue. What if a company makes profit but doesn't pay out any dividend? Is that okay? Now we must understand the various usage of the earnings. Now I would like you to imagine yourself being the company's CEO. This year, your company made 10 million ringgit profits. What would you do with the money? There are many things you can do with the money. Generally, you can do two things. Number one, pay dividends to the owners, also known as the shareholders. The common phrase we usually encounter is rewarding shareholders. Shareholders get periodic cash payments as passive income a few times a year, whether quarterly, half-yearly, yearly, or sometimes special one-time dividend. Or number two, you can retain the earnings in the company. So with that money, you have many options. Pay off debt, you can pay off loans to save the financing costs, or reinvest. For example, hire more people, open more branches, acquire other companies, increase your R&D spending, etc., etc. Or you can buy back share when you think the company's stocks is undervalued, or you do nothing at all, just keep as cash reserve. Being the head of the company, how you allocate the fund has a significant impact on the company's future earnings. If you are the CEO and decide to pay out a portion of the profit to shareholders as a dividend, what would be the reason? What is the best reason to pay dividends? Okay, there are many reasons to pay out dividends, right? Number one, to please shareholders. Who doesn't like passive income, right? That's why we commonly hear the term rewarding shareholders. And the best way is to give them money, right? Paying dividend is one of the best ways to make shareholders happy. Number two, could be abide by the dividend distribution policy. For example, REITs, real estate investment trusts, have to pay out 90 to 100% of their income to unit holders. Number three, you pay dividend just to keep your promise. Some holders spell out their dividend policy, so to be consistent, they keep their words. It might be the company's policy to pay out, say, 50% of their earnings as dividends. However, in my opinion, the best signal for me to pay out a dividend is when there is no better use of the earnings. Number four, you pay dividend, maybe you have no better use of the money. I think this is the best reason to pay dividends. It is when the company simply has too much cash and doesn't know how to deploy it for better usage. For example, let's examine the choices to deploy the retained earnings. Now, as a CEO, you can use the retained earnings, number one, to pay off debt. But what if the interest cost is extremely low? What if there's no outstanding loan at all? Then you won't be able to use it for this reason. Number two, maybe you want to invest, but if your market is saturated, there's no more room for business expansion, or maybe the risk is just too high. When the company has nowhere to invest, it shows that the business is at sunset. Number three, shall you use the money to buy back shares? from the open market. It only makes sense when the stock price is lower than the perceived value. If not, buying back shares at an extremely high price just destroys the company's value. Number 4, you can keep as cash reserve. But when a company has too much cash buffer, the money becomes a drag to the company's performance. Why not just return it to the shareholders? Therefore, investor can better deploy the capital to other more productive places. So, in my opinion, if the management doesn't have better things to do with the retained earnings, I would prefer that they pay the money to shareholders like us in the form of dividends. But then, why does it make perfect sense not to pay any dividend? So, by understanding the flow of the business profit, I guess you now comprehend the logic behind paying dividends. Definitely, there are many circumstances where it makes perfect sense for a company not to pay dividends at all. Number 1, there is a better use of the money. For example, the stock price is depressed and undervalued, and you can use the money to buy back shares from the market. So investors who want to exit get a better price while reducing the outstanding shares. You will have the same pizza with fewer slices, so each shareholder actually gets a bigger piece. But I think the best option is to invest the retained earnings to produce even more income. For companies that are growing rapidly, they need the money to expand their businesses. This is only good when the company is investing in creating more value. On the contrary, it is a red flag if the company makes many mistakes. For instance, an acquisition that doesn't provide synergy, a new venture that turns sour, or some hanky-panky related party transaction. Number 2 could be due to tax advantage. Dividends are considered taxable income in the US, UK, Australia, and most Western countries. Unlike Malaysia, Singapore, and Hong Kong, the dividends we receive as an individual are tax-free. For example, Apple company already pays taxes to the US government at the company level. And when Apple pays shareholders like us using the after-tax income, we get tax again. For a non-resident, the tax rate is as high as 30% flat. A classic example is Berkshire Hathaway, managed by Warren Buffett. Berkshire is a cash-rich company holding approximately $200 billion in cash. But the stock has not paid a dividend for the past few decades because of the reason I mentioned above. The reasons are more than reasonable. It makes perfect sense. Number 1, Buffett is a super investor and he can invest the money to create more returns for shareholders. Number 2, Berkshire buys back shares when its stock price is low. Number 3, shareholders can sell shares if they need money, which is considered a capital gain. In the US, a capital gain is taxed at a lower rate for stocks held more than a year. Essentially, shareholders have more flexibility and are not forced to pay taxes just for the dividend income received. In conclusion, yes, it makes perfect sense for some companies not to pay dividends, as long as the company leaders are great capital allocators and are wise enough to generate even more return using the retained earnings. I would love to have them manage it. Don't pay me any dividends if you can compound it at a higher rate. That's the main reason I invest in your business. Eventually, the earnings growth will translate into the stock price increase in the long term. Have you attended my free masterclass about stock investing? Check out the link. I understand that there are many free videos and training you can follow nowadays. That's why I came up with a no time wasted guarantee. You can register for the free online masterclass. If you learn nothing after 15 minutes of listening, capture the screen and email me to ask for a 10 ringgit trouble fee. So you will either learn a lot or at the bare minimum get paid 10 ringgit for 15 minutes of your time. So please go check it out now. My name is KCLau. I'm the author of the book Money Smart: How to Achieve Your Financial Goals Faster with Less. Be smarter with money.